Hi, my name is Jerry Roberts, and this presentation is on the exoneration of the Norfolk Four. Slide 1 is the agenda and what the actual presentation will cover and in the order in which it will cover each item. I want to get right into the timeline. I will briefly fill in the details or fill in some of the blanks, although I've given you the key dates here. Through 1997 and 98, we had the confessions of Daniel Williams, Joseph Dick, Eric Wilson, and Derek Tice, who are also known as the Norfolk Four. Each of these men committed to the murder of Michelle Bosco, sort of in consecutive order. Each of the men were told that they failed a polygraph test by a detective named Detective Robert Ford. Also, each of these men had confessions and details that did not match the crime scene. Further forensic evidence did not attach any of these men to the crime scene. In March of 1999, we had a confession. An inmate wrote a letter to a former girlfriend where he actually confessed to the murder of Michelle Bosco. He knew details of the crime scene that actually matched, as well as forensic evidence that matched his DNA and tied him to both the victim and the crime scene. On March 2000, Omar Ballard pled guilty to rape and murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Part of his plea deal with Detective Ford was that he must admit that he did the crime with the other four men, when in fact he originally confessed to the crime, that he and he alone committed the crime. He also later admitted that the only reason why he said the other four men were involved was so that he would avoid the death penalty. This played a major part in the exoneration, or at least a part of it. Another major part of the exoneration was in October 22nd, 2010, and a little prior to this, where a federal jury convicted Detective Ford of extortion. Over a 30-year career span, he was involved in closing at least 200 homicide cases. It was later found that he extorted people or informants. He paid people or paid informants to say that they knew certain things. He was involved in many cases that included false confessions, etc. It was both the confession of Omar and as well as the conviction of Detective Ford that ultimately led to the exoneration of all four men in 2017. Therefore, some of the critical issues that surround this case are false confession, perjury and false accusation, and official misconduct, namely by Detective Ford. The laws that surround this case are state laws of Virginia, such as capital murder and rape. Each of these laws carry specific sentencing that a judge must adhere to, either the death penalty or life in prison for capital murder. This case also covers criminal law and procedural law, which cover the rights of those that are accused. That's when we get into due process. Specifically, one of the men said that he tried to implement his right to remain silent, and Detective Ford continued interrogation for up to 13 minutes after that. Also, rule of law versus law and order, where rule of law says that you would adhere to the laws and not the brute force of those that are in authority, where that is exactly what we saw here by Detective Ford. Also, I believe that I'll say that he said he was implementing law and order. I have these terrible men that have confessed to this crime, therefore we're going to close the case and sentence them, and this is law and order. Where Friedrichs talks about many miscarriages of law have taken place in the name of law and order. The jurisprudence in this case, I will say, is legal positivism, whereas that's more concerned with the source and the correct procedures of the law. Valid law means appropriate procedures and legal system. And I think up until the point that Detective Ford was convicted, that is what was going on here. Hey, it's not about morals or if they did it, or not, or maybe, wrongfully accusing someone. We have a crime, we have confessions, we have specific laws that carry specific sentencing. Also, maybe a bit utilitarianism. I'll mention that only because utilitarianism is not concerned with who actually, or would not be concerned with who actually committed the crime, more so what makes the most people happy. And when you have a highly publicized case and you have confessions and you're able to close the case, then you have trust in a legal system. You have people that are happy, and that's the end of the story. So, on a socio-legal perspective, I want to talk about Max Weber. Max Weber talks about a conformity of law by society in order to I'll just go straight to what Friedrichs talks about, Weber's definition of law, which is an order will be called a law if it's externally guaranteed by the probability that coercion, either physical or psychological, to bring about conformity by a specific group of people and that's their purpose. And the problem here with this is that it can cause disenchantment and alienation. I think that we saw some of that with these four men were sailors. They were taught to adhere to authority. And when you have an authoritative figure tell you that you failed a polygraph and therefore you committed the crime, and there goes the confession from that. You have people that specifically trust in the technical expertise of a system, and therefore sometimes they get involved in the wrong sort of way with that system. Critique of law would boil down to internal critique of law and maybe a little bit of a radical critique of law where you have those that are in power oppress those that are not, where we saw with Detective Ford and the suspects. We saw an abuse of law and positions of power and people that were in positions of power. We saw appellate judges upholding the rulings of the trial court because they had specific laws being broken, such as capital murder and rape, and those carry specific sentencing. So by legal reasoning, if this happens and we follow these procedures, then we have the correct result. So I think that we saw a lot of that here as well. Again, I thank you very much for listening. This is the exoneration of the Norfolk Four. Thank you.